Summer and I are just enjoying a walk along one of our favourite spots here in JBR. And so we've put together a full video because we get so many questions about how we moved here, how we set up our business, how we got residency. So we decided to sit down and host a podcast style interview with the company that helped us get set up.
Yeah.
So we asked a lot of your questions. It was great, wasn't it?
Step-by-step process of how to set up a business here and other ways to get residency. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
Here we are. You now join us in the podcast studio. So we're going to take a deep dive into the process of setting up a business in Dubai. We'll leave a Google form in the description if you'd like to find out any more information or set up a business yourself. You can check that out.
Today we are with Shellen, who is an expert in setting up businesses here in Dubai. We also used Shellen in the company last year to set up our own business here. But yeah, we're just going to do loads of questions, simplify it, go step by step through the process. Okay, so the first question is, how would our viewers go about setting up a business here in Dubai?
So there are multiple options. Obviously, the UAE is quite large. Everyone knows about Dubai, but there are actually 7 Emirates. So depending on what the business is, how they're going to be operating, there are many, many different options. So different types of jurisdictions, which will work for different types of businesses. So the first thing that we need to kind of establish, which we would have done with you guys, is obviously the activity, what the business is actually going to be doing, who they're targeting. If it's something that's in a specialized kind of industry, there are specific free zones, for example, that cater to the needs of those types of activities.
Yeah, and one of the things that we found when we were moving here, and a decision that we had to make, is, are we going to be doing business here in the UAE, or is the business purpose to do international business? Because that does make a difference. And we actually chose to do a mainland business because we do conduct business here in the UAE. So that's also something for them to think about, right?
Exactly. You don't need to rack your brains, obviously, trying to figure that out. That's a big part of what I do, as Matt and Summer themselves know. I will run through that with you and figure out what's going to be the best route. So in terms of the jurisdictions, there are different ways of setting up, as Matt has touched on. We've got mainland, FreeZone, offshore. So depending on what's going on, we can obviously have that discussion, as you guys know. The legal structure, so you can own the business as an individual, you can own as a corporate owner, you can also do a subsidiary, you can do a branch. So there's multiple different kind of options. The great thing about the UAE is obviously, you know, everyone sees the glitz and the glamour and everyone's doing really well, as we know, and it's all glamorous and great. But it does cater to everyone at all levels. You know, whether you're a startup, whether you're expanding, whether it's your 25th branch around the world, there is an option for you. So with that being said, obviously there are different options for, you know, offices, warehouses. If you're not that big and you don't need that space yet, we've also got options which are really, really cost effective and means that you don't necessarily need to get an office depending on how many staff you've got. You know, how quick you're planning on expanding, those kind of things. So when it comes to visas, obviously, as you guys know, you live here, you're going to need them. But in terms of employee visas, we can help with those as well. And that is very flexible, you know, grow as you wish to grow. But a lot of the driving force for a lot of people that are moving the business here, as well as getting away from tax, as we know, is for residency purposes. So even if you're just looking to set up a business for the visa, there are options there as well that are really, really cost effective.
And adding to that, how often does the person that's got the visa need to be in the UAE for the residency? Do they need to live here a certain amount of time, or how many days a year do they have to be here?
So it's not necessarily a days a year situation. It's more a period of time that you have to show that you've entered the UAE. So if you've got a visa that's 2 years, so it's an investor or an employee visa, for example, then you have to visit the UAE at least once within a 12-month period. Otherwise, immigration will automatically cancel your visa.
Right. So it could be you come in for 2 days, but just because you've entered that,
you have to go through the immigration process. The other thing that to kind of consider, from I think it was September, they released a new kind of initiative where if anyone is outside of the UAE for more than 6 months, they have to reapply for entry. So it's like an online form and you have to explain why you've not been in the UAE for 6 months.
So we briefly touched on mainland, FreeZone and offshore. Obviously, when people are coming over, setting up a business, they're thinking, which option should I go for? Is there a specific one that's the best, or what are your thoughts?
That's a question that I get a lot, but it's very, very kind of unique and specific to the individual. you know, how you're going to be operating the business. You guys mentioned earlier about setting up a mainland business because you're operating from here. So that's exactly what we need to consider when setting up something for someone. If it's purely international business, you know, everything's online, nothing's going to happen in the UAE, but you want to live here, you want to be able to invoice from here, then a FreeZone is 100% the best way to go. You know, it's the cheapest option. It gives you your residency, allows you to operate from a tax-free environment, still 0% on FreeZone international business anyway. But if you're someone that's going to be expanding the business in the UAE, then you absolutely have to look at the mainland license. You know, you've not really got a choice because that's the only way you can operate locally, completely freely with no restrictions, you know, target government entities if that's what your client base is going to look like. It really, really depends on the business. So there's not really a right or wrong. It's very unique to the business, to the person, you know, and what the kind of short and long-term plans are.
So to clarify, if I was coming over, moving to Dubai, I have an online business, maybe I do graphic design or social media marketing for companies all across the world, but I want to live here. I could probably do FreeZone. And then say if I was coming here and offering my services, maybe as a videographer, actually working with companies in the UAE, going and filming for them, would that mean I'd have to be a mainland company because I'm doing transactions with UAE businesses?
So that there are such thing as grey areas as well. So someone like that could potentially be deemed like a freelancer, you know, and then they're working under their license. So for example, if someone wanted to come and do some content work through you guys, they could potentially work underneath your license, even if their license isn't a mainland license. So this is what I mean. It's all very unique, circumstance based. So as you guys know, we'll have a long conversation about kind of what the short-term plans are, what the long-term plans are, what is likely to happen, you know, situations that might have a slight chance of happening. And then I can give the scenarios as well. But yeah, it's not really a question that's easy to answer just because it is so individual.
Yeah, so guys, if you do have further questions on that, make sure to fill out your details in the form below. As Shellen said, everything is so unique here. So it's best to just call her, run through your situation, and you can obviously advise what's best for them.
All right, Shellen, so there was a lot of info there. So can you just sum up again the main difference between mainland and FreeZone?
Yeah. So the fundamental difference between the two routes is if you're doing international business, FreeZone is the way to go. So a FreeZone license will cover you for FreeZone business and international business. A mainland license leaves you completely clear to work with anyone, whether it's in the UAE or internationally. So you can do business with other mainland companies, government entities, other free zones, and international businesses. So mainland is the one where you've got the most freedom. Free zone's a bit more restricted. Not always a bad thing. Again, depends on your business plan and how you're actually going to be working, because that could definitely just tick all the boxes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And once you set up, let's say, a free zone, and then you decide that you want to do more business here in the UAE, can you change that license?
So there's not necessarily a way to change it because there are different governing bodies. So the free zone is its own jurisdiction. So you can either have a branch of that existing free zone or set up a brand new business which is in the mainland. That can get a little bit complicated just because the name might not be the same. You have to go through the process of getting a bank account and everything set up again. So it's effectively like starting from scratch. But again, this is why we have such a big conversation at the beginning on the kind of short and long-term plans, because if this is something that's likely to happen in the first year, my advice is going to be just dive right in and do the license that you need so you can just keep going, because there's no point in building the business and then getting to a point where actually now I need to close this and start again.
That makes sense.
I have 2 more points to add on this section. We'll go into the costs more in detail later, but FreeZone is a more cost-effective way to set up than mainland, right? And then another question that I've had from a lot of people coming here is the setting up of bank accounts when you're a FreeZone company versus mainland. So is it known to be a lot harder as a FreeZone company to get a bank account here in Dubai?
I mean, to answer that simply, yes. You know, FreeZone's always a little bit trickier. We have, well, obviously I've been doing this for a few years. So for me, I've got my preferred free zones that I recommend my clients, and there are always driving forces. And normally the main driving force is that exact point. you know, making sure that, you know, I can do the license quite easily for them, get them their visas, that's fine. But what is the point if they cannot operate?
Yeah.
So for me, the free zones that I recommend, sometimes they might not be the cheapest free zones. They're still more cost effective than mainland, of course, but they are kind of an all-round good choice. So, you know, ease of operating. I tend to try and find the ones that do not require NOCs, do not require office space, easier with the banking process, those kind of things. So for me, it's very much important to think about the whole journey rather than just setting up the cheapest option. And I always tell everyone that, because it's not just about the initial costs.
For sure. And I think for us, that's what was so helpful about working with you guys, is if we had to set it up all on our own, we would have no idea. But we had so much advice. And like you said, thinking of the future of the business too.
Now, moving on to one of the main reasons people come to Dubai, of course, that's the benefits. So could you run us through them?
Yeah, of course. So I think the one thing that the UAE is famous for is probably the tax side of things, which is why a lot of us Brits end up running here, as we all know. So corporate tax is still 0% for international business, but they have introduced from the 1st of June, 9% corporate tax. Frustrating for those of us that have been here and experienced the zero for so long, but obviously compared to the rest of the world, we're still the lowest tax rate anywhere. When it comes to personal income, we're still all safe, which is obviously great, still paying 0%. There's no capital gains or anything else like that where we have to consider kind of long-term tax issues for us, to ourselves individually. But from the business perspective, like I said, the 9% is only on local business anyway. So,
and is the 9% corporation tax that's coming in, is that over a certain amount? So once your business hits a threshold of like 100,000 or?
So the threshold is 375,000 dirhams.
Okay.
The details on that, I'm not 100% sure on. We do have a tax and accounting team who will be able to specify exactly which income will be taxable, what's going to be exempt, you know, what the levies are, those kind of things. I'm not a tax expert. Sorry, guys. But I can obviously put anyone that wants to talk about that side of things in touch with an expert that will be able to run through those things. But the 375 is around 100,000 US dollars.
So up to that is 0%, and then over that, potentially.
Then there's some tax implications that obviously just need to be dealt with. Again, not everything's going to be taxed anyway. If it's, you know, the majority of the business is outside of the UAE, that's going to be exempt anyway. It's just a case of doing your annual audits and making sure that, you know, whatever's coming in is taxed appropriately. One of the other reasons that a lot of people, you know, end up coming over to the UAE, other than the tax and the sunshine, is the fact that we are so strategically placed. You know, in terms of doing business, Europe, Africa, the Far East, we have access to so many markets. And I think obviously you guys will probably realize this a bit more as you operate more and more in the region. The reach here is just incredible. You know, as well as the other benefits, that's something that really, really benefits a lot of the businesses that set up here and expand into the region.
Another benefit of moving to the UAE, as Matt and I know, is the lifestyle, which was a huge factor for us moving here. I mean, firstly, the sunshine is incredible. People here are amazing. There's so many people all around the world, make new friends and just meet such different people. We've met a lot of entrepreneurs, people setting up their own business. So it's great to surround ourselves with like-minded people. And then also there's just like an endless list of things to do here, isn't there?
There's so much. I mean, I think we're coming into an era where if you set up your business right, you can spend time in different locations. Yeah. And that's one of the main attractions for me about being here in Dubai, especially with the license, like we talked about earlier in the podcast. You don't have to be here for all of the year. And so what works really well for summer is to spend part of the year in the UK and Europe, and then part of the year here in Dubai. And then you're really enjoying the best of both worlds. And that for us so far has been working so well. Like we love spending time here. We've met such amazing people.
And because it's in the center of kind of the world, we flew to Australia last year. That was a direct flight. And then obviously you get a direct flight to the UK. Just, yeah, it's a great location on the map.
With tax as well, I know a lot of people are looking at investing in property here in Dubai. So if you guys have followed us for a while, you know, Summer and I have bought property in the UK in a combination of in our personal name and also in a company. And it's a question that often comes up around being in Dubai. You know, should you structure your property investments in your personal name? Is there a more efficient and smarter way to do it? You know, incorporating it with a company. Obviously, we've got the benefits here of no capital gains tax on the income as well, which makes a massive difference. If you're an investor in the UK, you know all about that. So perhaps you could tell us some more about the best way to structure setting up property in here.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is going to be very individual. You know, where the person is a tax resident will massively impact this. But obviously for us back home with properties over there, we have to think about capital gains, inheritance tax, as well as the kind of short-term income tax that we have to pay on rental income. So over here, we don't necessarily have the income issues. So the day-to-day kind of short-term tax issues aren't a problem, regardless of whether you own it personally or not. But the issues, I think, come up more so for expats that aren't Muslim, that are in the UAE. So for example, if I wanted to buy property here or you wanted to buy property here, it's more the longer term. So everything will come under Sharia law. So the way kind of around that, which a lot of my clients will do, is to set up a passive kind of vehicle in an offshore jurisdiction. So like a holding company or a foundation. So a foundation sits somewhere between kind of a trust and an operating company. So you've got a bit more control over who the beneficiaries are. And that could effectively just be wrapped around your properties here. So this is really good for, I think, all expats in the UAE or anyone with assets in the UAE, whether it's a business, whether it's a property, you know, any kind of assets at all can be wrapped in this. What that does is then gives us control over our assets. So Sharia law is not automatic. It's not a given, you know. I'm not sure how many of your clients will know much about how it works, but, you know, assets can get frozen if someone passes away, which can be an issue. So, for example, if you guys get married one day and then Matt was unfortunately to die, then that could cause a problem. I feel like I've just gone down a very bad hole.
No, carry on. I'm finding this really interesting.
No, I'm finding this interesting too.
Okay, fine. So, for example, if Matt was to pass away, God forbid, then that could cause a problem for you. So if all the assets are, even if they're in both of your names, you've got to consider what's going to happen because, you know, the assets will be frozen. So even if there's a will in place, this kind of just gives you that added layer of protection. And he gets to dictate, you know, if I pass away, 50% of whatever we've got is going to you, end of. Whereas, you know, Sharia law has some different rules, which us as Westerners aren't necessarily used to. So, you know, assets can be passed to family members just because of what sex they are, regardless of whether you've spoken to them in 10 years. So for Westerners who are now living in the UAE, there's an extra layer of things that we need to consider, but it's also very easy to protect ourselves from these things. It's just having the knowledge and making sure that we do what we need to do to protect everyone.
So can you set that up after you've bought the assets, or do you have to buy the assets within it? Okay.
So you can, if you've already got property here and it's in your personal name and you then want to change it over, then absolutely we can do that. We'll just set up the entity and then there's a transfer, but you're effectively gifting it to yourself because it was founded by you.
So say if somebody was coming over to Dubai and they wanted to buy a property, could they get a visa because they've purchased a property?
Yeah. So what we've just touched on with the foundations and holding companies, that wouldn't necessarily allow for this route. But if they did have at least one property in their own name, equity needs to be at least 2 million dirhams, which is
£400,000?
550, 500, something like that. So if they were to own a property and they've got that amount of equity, then we can actually apply for a golden visa. So if it was a case of don't actually need to set up a business, I just want an investment there, I want to be able to come backwards and forwards, open a bank account, those kind of things, then absolutely there is that route and that option when it comes to it.
And how long is a golden visa?
So golden visa is 10 years validity, which is the longest visa that you can get. So obviously there's a lot about citizenship by investment and stuff around the world. The UAE, you can never get the passport.
Right.
So I think you can through marriage, but I don't know much about that. So I can't really sell you guys that, sorry. But in terms of the actual residency, that is the longest that you can get, which is great. And it gives people a bit more kind of freedom to come and go as they please. And just makes life a little bit easier. Open a bank account, get settled in. Even if you're not living here full time, come and go and, You know, you don't have to do your medical tests until 10 years down the line.
Do you only need to come into the UAE once a year? Is that the same as the...
So the immigration rules will pretty much be the same with all visas anyway. It's just more their process and internal kind of system. If you haven't been in, they're going to wonder why. I'd have to double check if there's anything kind of special with the golden visas, but typically most of the visas do allow, do require you to at least have visited once a year. But as we know, there are worse places in the world to have to go once
It's quite
a year.
easy to come here once a year.
You come here even once for an amazing holiday.
Yeah.
And does that golden visa, is that easier to bring your family in? Because obviously we've mostly talked about it from a business and individual perspective, but a lot of people will be looking to bring their family over as well. So how do visas work with bringing family?
So any visa that you get, so for example, if you are married and you've got 2 children and you want your whole family to be able to come over here or at least have residency, whether you're living here full time or not, what would happen is, for example, if the father set up a business or had a golden visa or had some form of visa, employee, whatever it is, that person can then sponsor his wife and his children very, very easily. So there's not really any restrictions with that at all. But the main kind of thing is get the first visa and then sponsor the others. So whatever length of time. So for example, if someone got a golden visa and they want to sponsor their wife and their kids, they would also get a golden visa. They'd get the 10-year in line. So it would be like an extension of their visa. So the dad would have a golden visa, wife and kids will have the same length of time.
Does the couple have to be married to have the sponsorship? Or if you've been like a partner for 10 years, is that eligible?
So unfortunately not. There does have to be the legal kind of agreement when it comes to sponsoring your spouse. So you have to be married legally.
Lastly, I think we'll cover sort of the experience Matt and I had last year setting up our business and what we kind of did in the process. So the first thing we did, we actually went into the office, chatted with you guys, talked about our business and our goals for the future. And then you guys did all like the paperwork stuff. I don't know, the like legit stuff. But then we went to a notary. Was that right? A notary signing?
Yeah, so Shellen, why don't you explain what the legal stuff is?
Okay, that's fine. Look, to be honest, I don't really want to delve too much into the legal stuff because it's not something that people need to get stressed out about or overthink, because we do, as you know, take care of it, which is why you don't know what it's called or what was going on. So it's fine. So obviously we have the initial consultation, as you've mentioned, as we spoke about earlier. That is very much to kind of understand you, understand your business, understand the driving force. So that is, for me, probably the most crucial part of making sure that whatever we're going to do is the right thing, not only for the next 6 months, but for the foreseeable future. And if it's not, then that's fine. We can obviously make a plan for the kind of longer term as well. So if we know that this is something that's going to suit you for the next 12 to 24 months, and we know that at that point something's going to shift, we can prepare. I'm surprised I managed to say that without stumbling there.
One thing I loved about the process, and you guys sorted all of that for us, we then went to a notary to do some signatures. We had a driver come and pick us up. When we got to the building, they kind of showed us where to go, where to wait. We definitely didn't have to stress or worry about anything. It was a very hands-free experience. So that was one thing I loved about the process. It was very easy, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that initial conversation that we had, you mentioned we went into the office, but most people, they can do that on Zoom, they can do that over the phone. It's really, I think what people might be interested in is how much time you actually physically need to be here.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the people setting up a business here would also have businesses in other places. They'll be very busy, as we are. So let's say they have a call with you and they, want to move ahead with setting up like a mainland business. At what stage would they need to come over to the UAE to actually do the medical test and things like that?
Yeah. I think, look, with the initial process, that can be done on Teams, face-to-face, on the phone. Most of our work gets done on WhatsApp here, as we are now used to. Very different to the UK, but now, there's so many ways of getting through the initial aspect. When it comes to setting up the license, as you guys know, most of it was over email. A lot of the kind of documents will be sent over email. We'll have a WhatsApp group to make things kind of easier to understand. If you need to do Teams calls or anything, we can do that during the process. With a mainland license, you guys will be completely familiar. The only time we physically need you when we're doing the license is for the notary, because you need to physically go to the government office and sign everything. So we do have a way around that as well. So for people who are very, very busy, as a lot of our clients are, we do have ways to get that done without them here via a power of attorney. So we do have options for people that are very, very busy. That process, as you guys know, will probably take about 2 weeks on average. Obviously, depends on what the business type is, if there's an office involved, if there's external approvals. So that can vary, but on average, it's about 2 weeks to kind of get the license issued. At that point, we obviously start the visa process, which you guys are familiar with as well. So you get to go and give some blood and have an x-ray.
Yeah, so that was really interesting.
Very seamless experience though.
It was very seamless. So we got picked up one morning, went to kind of a government building, and there was actually separate areas, wasn't there? So you went into the men's section, I went into the women's section. Maybe I waited for 10 minutes. Then I had a little blood test, or they took the blood out, and then got changed into a little blue kind of apron thing, and then had a chest x-ray. And probably in and out within 30 minutes, very seamless. Driver took us back to our apartment. And there was another time where we had to give our passports, and they came and collected them and then dropped them off. So we didn't even need to do anything for that. We just literally gave our passports. So that was pretty seamless, but that was about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's always going to be some physical things that you need to do, but we do try and make everyone's life as easy as possible where possible. Especially if you're just moving here. As you guys know, there's already so much that you need to think about, where you're going to live, how things work here, setting up bank accounts, and getting into the swing of 40-degree heat every day.
And we met the other day, and we were talking about just all of the other things as well that you can help with. So it isn't just the setup. If someone is looking to move over here and wants everything taken care of, like from finding a property, correct me if I'm wrong, helping with schools and all of that stuff. Can you help
We have
with
a
that?
concierge team. So we can't physically do everything in-house, but we tend to have contact. So even if we can't coordinate it, we've got people that we can put you in touch with for certain things. If there's like an overall relocation package that you'd like, the concierge team will just kind of put something together for you. The great thing about our company is we do have specialist departments dealing with different things, like everywhere. So the concierge team are very much there to make people like you's lives easier.
And touching back on the process, so once we did the medical, is that then when the visa is issued after that, and then it's pretty much the process is done and we can go and apply for bank accounts?
So the physical part of the process is obviously the medical. And then you pass your passport over to one of our PROs. They'll go and deal with the visa side of things and get all of that sorted before giving you your passport back and your visa all done and dusted. So that part of the process, for someone that is not in the UAE for any of the other process, can be done between 5 to 10 working days. Depends if you do VIP and what the process is there. But typically speaking, if they don't take any extras whatsoever, they would need to be in the UAE for 2 weeks.
Got it. Okay. And we should touch on how long it took us from start to finish. So from the moment that we went to the office, had to sit down, to doing the bank accounts, which was actually probably one of the most lengthy processes out of everything. And we did that once we had our visa. It was around two and a half months, I would say.
Yeah, for
8 to
absolutely
12
everything.
weeks.
Yeah, and that was quite good because that worked with our time frame. Obviously, we were new to the UAE. We're actually living here in Dubai for that time.
Yeah.
So I'd say if our goal was absolutely set the business up faster than we could have,
100%.
but it was actually like after the first meeting, let's think about how we want to structure this, let's spend some time. There's no rush if you want to take a bit longer to figure it out. We wanted to make sure we got the right bank account. So we visited several to make sure we had the right setup, for us. Make sure we chose the right bank, which you guys helped with. You recommended the ones that are good to go to that each have certain benefits.
So look, the banking side of things is obviously going to be a bit more painful than it would be back home for anyone. But as you guys, knew from the beginning, we manage your expectations and let you know what to expect with that side of things. It's not going to be like back home. It's not, here's a company's house certificate, here's my passport, can I have a bank account? A little bit more of a process here because we are all guests in the country. So that process will be handled by the banking team. They are amazing. Similarly to the experience you would have had with me, I'm sure you would have had the same experience with the banking team, have the consultation. This is the minimum balance. This is the banks that kind of popped to my head. These are the transactions that we're likely to do, you know, whatever it may be, they will then guide you as they did with you. And then take it from there. But the banking is probably the longest part of the process.
It is. It's the money talks process where the more you have, the more your business is going to do, the easier it is, you know. And you might have to go for a few applications in different banks. But the great thing is, obviously, once you've established a trading history here, you've done some good business for a year or so, you can always change banks if you prefer a different one at the end of the day. But I think the great thing with digital banks now is they all have an app, really.
That is what I was about to jump into. Yeah. We've got some great digital options now as well, which lets people get started probably quicker than when you guys set up. So
nice.
We've evolved.
A few days ago, I put on my Instagram story to ask me questions about setting up a business here in Dubai. So we've got a few questions that we're going to answer today. So the first question, which everybody wants to know because it's about money and costs, how much approximately do you need to set up a business in Dubai?
Yeah, great question. So we want to get straight into the good info. So Summer and I set up last year. Process in its entirety took about 2 months, and we spent $10,000 on that. And that was for everything to be done. We got a few like upgrades in the package, didn't we? Some good VIP service. So it doesn't have to cost that. But the best person to speak about that, of course, is Shellen.
Just to clarify that we got a mainland company with 2 visas underneath.
Good point.
The visas are the more expensive part, and obviously we had 2 of them under our business. But tell us more about...
Well, exactly that. You clearly don't need me here, guys. So you are completely right. So the visa is what brings the cost up. So in terms of the actual license themselves, and that's a business license, what you need to be able to operate, the cost of those are relatively cheap, especially if we're looking at a FreeZone. So if we're looking at a FreeZone license, something very basic, maybe a creative, you know, marketing agency or something like that, you can get something like that very, very cheap from like 6,000 dirhams, which is the equivalent to what, $1,800, something like that.
£1,200.
Yeah. So in terms of the visas, it's just more that side of things that bring up the cost. So if you're planning on living here, or if you're not, but you want a local bank account, the visa is something that unfortunately we can't really avoid. So yeah. It's just, it varies, but you can get a business license that's relatively cheap anyway.
So you could get the business license that's less expensive than the overall cost, but then you can't set up the bank account. You can't do the business here. So it kind of doesn't make sense.
It's the visa that is kind of necessary.
Yeah.
But look, there are entrepreneur packages where you get the business license and the visa, which start from around 16,000 dirhams in the FreeZone. Again, that's not going to suit everyone because of the type of business, you know, how they're operating, if they need more than one visa. But if it's a 1 visa package, then there are options which are relatively cheap.
Next question for you, Shellen. Can you move an already trading company from the UK to the UAE?
I mean, there are a few follow-up questions I'd obviously ask to that. You know, what is it? What are they planning on doing? Closing that one, moving it over? But the short answer to that is yes. You know, if you want to set up a subsidiary, a branch, or just replicate what you've already got going on, then absolutely.
And following from that, somebody's asked me, how do I get a visa for Dubai and to live here without setting up a business?
So there are quite a few options when it comes to getting a visa here. The kind of simplest one is an employee visa. So if you've been offered a job over here, you'll get your employee visa. They'll take care of everything, provide you with medical insurance, all of those kind of things. The other side of it is more kind of a personal route. So, you know, investor visa, property. If you purchase property and you want to go down that route, you can get a golden visa. There's something called a green visa, which has just been released. So there are other options when it comes to visas. But again, it's just going to depend on your circumstances. If you're an entrepreneur, if you've invested locally, what your income is, that there's going to be different routes and different options. But absolutely, you can get a visa without setting up a business.
I wanted to ask you, because a lot of people, I feel, do social media.
Yep.
They're maybe influencers, or they have a social media business where they can work online. Maybe they're a graphic designer. What would be the best route for them? Would they set up a FreeZone company as a freelancer and trade under that? What would you recommend?
This is a really difficult question to answer without having some more context. So it depends on who they're invoicing, who they're targeting, how they're going to be operating, you know, where's the money actually coming from? where are they physically going to be doing things? You know, I know we had a bit more of a personal conversation about you guys and doing some filming here. So again, if they're planning on filming locally, they'll likely need some external approvals to be able to do so. If they do go down that route, the FreeZone license is going to make it that much harder. So it really depends on the business.
Right. So best thing to do is basically just contact you.
Yeah.
And then you'll give them advice on where to set up the business.
Next question we had was, what was our biggest lessons that we learned from setting up a business here in Dubai?
Yeah. So one thing I would say that I didn't realize would take so long was setting up the bank accounts. I do feel like it's known here that the bank accounts are quite difficult to do, but we applied for a few. Then we had to go into the branch.
Yeah.
And yeah, we finally did set it up, but that was definitely a lengthy process.
Yeah. Another lesson I would say is just knowing that there is yearly costs associated with running a business in Dubai. It's not just a one-time setup, but that's as to be expected. It's just your license renewal. It's very easy to get set up and maintain. And I think the costs, again, vary on what business type you have set up and how many people you have within that business. Another question we had from you guys is around what level your business needs to already be operating at to move out here, or do you need to have something there established? Do you need a minimum revenue amount? So perhaps you could talk to us about that.
Yeah, of course. That's really easy to answer. The answer to that is no expectations. You know, the UAE, with all its glitz and glamour, is still very much inviting and accepting and very much has the platform for everyone at all levels. So whether you're starting up and it's a brand new venture, you've never had a business before, and this is your first time trying, you can definitely do that. If you are a Fortune 500 company, by all means, come over as well.
Send us a message, definitely.
Somebody's asked, is there a strong freelancing scene in Dubai? I'd say, quite a lot of young people, especially coming out here. We've met quite a lot.
I think that's it, isn't it? I mean, a lot of these questions are geared at like the specifics of setting up, but when you're wanting to move somewhere, you've got to really think of why that is. And, you know, it's like-minded people, it's living within a culture and environment that you feel that you can both enjoy and really thrive in. And what we found is opportunities are abundant here. Everyone wants to do well. They want to see you do well, which is not necessarily the same as everywhere. You know, growing up in the UK, especially in a smaller town, when you start to have success, not everyone loves it. You will get people that are a bit like, oh, that's strange, especially when you're young. So if you are young and you are getting success, obviously that's awesome for you. And if you want somewhere where people around you are going to be appreciative of that, I think Dubai could be the spot. Next up, we've got a question from someone considering living here in Dubai, but working an employed but online-based job from a UK employer. So is there something available for someone like that?
So they did make quite a few changes to visas. Obviously, we all lived through the joy that was COVID. So there were quite a few changes for people. And, you know, as Dubai opened up quite quickly in comparison to other places, they did make some amendments to be able to get people to come over here, be able to work from here. So there are definitely options for people who are being paid by overseas entities and visas that are outside of the norm. I'm not in the visa team, I'm not an expert, but we do have a division within the business that can help with that side of things. So if anyone does want to kind of go into more specifics about visa options, then I can definitely put them in touch with the right person.
Next question is, do I need a business license to rent out my home via an estate agency when I'm not using it? So maybe it's like a holiday home. He comes here a few times a year.
So if it's going through an estate agency, then no, not at all. As long as you've got a third party doing the contracts, doing the maintenance, doing everything else, then absolutely not. But it's your own property anyway. So even if you're going in and cleaning it yourself, not really breaking any rules, it's just more the documents and the kind of legal side of things. It's fine.
Last question is, are you accepting new clients to help set up their business here?
I mean, very short answer to that is yes, definitely. No, of course. A big part of our role is obviously consulting and bringing on more people and helping them expand into the UAE. So yes, if you need help, get in touch.
We can definitely vouch of how good it is, because Matt and I did it all last year. And we just wanted to bring you here, Shalin, so you can give us all your expert advice. Because although we went through the process, we still don't 100%, we can't explain it super simply, can we? Because it's quite
we
a
don't
lengthy
have
process.
the full authority to explain on it, and that's exactly why you're here. But it was really important to us that we set up the business. It's been a year since then. We wanted to try everything ourselves before we recommended anything or before we talked about it to you guys. So yeah, we hope you enjoyed this video.
Thank you for having me, guys.
No worries. And thanks everyone for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And also the Google form is down there if you do want to chat with Shalin on the phone, and she can advise you on which kind of direction is best for your situation.
Yeah. Thanks again, Shalin.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. Thanks you guys for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you guys in one of our next videos.